It was an unseasonably warm February day in 2017 in the small rural town of Delphi, Indiana. It's not a place where you worry when your teenage kids decide to go on an adventure. So when Abby Williams and her best friend Libby German decided to go on a hike near the Monon High Bridge in the middle of the day, no one thought it was dangerous. But when Libby and Abby did not show up when they were supposed to get picked up, their families began to worry. And they began to search. Then the next day, the worst possible news. The bodies of these two young girls were found, both victims of murder. As the investigation progressed over 5 years, there were sketches of the suspect that looked like two different people. And there was also video of the killer. Then, finally, an arrest of the accused murderer, Richard Allen. Allen says he didn't do it, and he also alleges it was a group of Odinists who were actually responsible, white nationalists practicing the ancient Nordic religion. Images of the murder scene have been sealed, but have been described in court papers and leaked online. And all this has led to more drama and more arrests in the case. Tonight, we return to the scene and bring you all the latest legal controversy as we continue our investigation of the Delphi murders.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And as we begin this hour talking about the Delphi murders, I want to remind you that it took 5 years. It took 5 years to solve this murder, to get to an arrest. Now, was it actually solved? That's for the jury to determine, obviously. But from the investigator's perspective, point of view in all of this, and the prosecution, it took them 5 years to solve this case. A long time. A long time. Especially when we found out who they arrested and some of the documents that existed, the fact that he had admitted being there almost immediately after the murders, and yet there was no follow-up until 5 years later. Still boggles my mind, but it took 5 years to get to this arrest. And during the course of those 5 years, very little information was publicly known. And that's not necessarily super uncommon in the world because investigators want to hold back certain information as they continue their investigation, because sometimes, especially in high-profile cases, you get people from left and right and all over the place coming out of the woodwork, sometimes confessing to the crime. And you try to hold back information that only the killer would know, that has not been publicly released, so you can verify that. You also don't want to compromise any leads that you're currently working on. So that part was normal. But it has continued in this case. And as you know, at Court TV, we cover cases all around the country. And the state of Indiana is one where we haven't covered a ton of cases. We've never covered a trial because they've never permitted cameras inside the courtroom. They just haven't. And then what I've found, though, in this entire process, from investigation to charges to the court proceedings, that Indiana is one of the most secretive jurisdictions in our nation. Now, in our system of justice, each state is allowed to do whatever they want to do as long as it's within the guidelines of the U.S. Constitution. So they have their own rules, practices, and the way they do what they do. But again, that brings me back to what has taken place in this case, where we've learned very little. And even after the charges, we learned a little bit more, but not a ton. Not a lot has been made public in this case. And you compare it to other jurisdictions. Like, we understand Florida has always been wide open because of their sunshine laws. They believe that is the best way to run the government, that everything is open as can be. Other jurisdictions like California, where they don't have a grand jury, a defendant is arrested and charged, there's a preliminary hearing. So before you get to the trial, you see and hear almost all of the evidence, because in a courtroom, a judge has to make a decision based upon the evidence if there's enough to go to trial. But in this case, we've learned very, very little until Richard Allen's defense team filed some motions. And this is an aggressive defense. This is not, you don't have the evidence to prove that Richard Allen did this. It's, you don't have the evidence, and you do have the evidence, and we've seen the evidence that you have to show that someone else is actually responsible. So the defense, out of the box, filed papers, lots of information that was not known before in this case. And this is a case, again, where the judge and everyone is very closely holding all this information back. And the reason to hold it back, in this case and in other cases I've seen, somebody, well, you don't want to taint the jury, you want to make sure the defendant gets a fair trial. I don't know what other considerations there are, but those are usually the two biggest ones. But in cases like cases in California where you have a preliminary hearing, or Florida where you have sunshine laws, or other states where information is known, you still get a fair trial. It still happens over and over again. People are found guilty, some people are found not guilty. Again, depending upon the evidence and the jury's decision. But this aggressive defense has laid out two completely different scenarios now that we're trying to figure out, that the jury will have to decide, right? And the jury will have to decide what is the truth. What happened to Abby and Libby? Who is responsible? And as we get closer and closer to that date, which now has been moved from coming up just after the new year to next fall, it seems that there's more at stake here, because the attorneys who represented Richard Allen and put forth this alternative theory of the case based upon the prosecution's own evidence, not on the case anymore, and have been expelled from the case. The prosecutors wanted them off, the judge wanted them off, and right now they're off trying to get back on. And a lot of the issues related to that comes back to the release or leaking of information in a state where, again, of all the jurisdictions we've covered stories, the most secretive or most unwilling to make anything public before the trial. And again, I understand why they're doing it. I'm just pointing out that it's vastly different than many of the jurisdictions where we cover cases. And it's because of those issues that his attorneys are gone, and this thing is in a whole different sphere. So we've got some information to go through, but let's go back to the scene, because that's where all of this really begins, and that's what this is about, the crime scene where these two young girls were found murdered. Again, based upon information released by the defense through their motion papers, we've recreated, based upon the allegations of the defense, what this crime scene may have looked like. Take a look at it. Folks, on the screen, Abby and Libby. Libby, flat on her back, left arm stretched above her head, touching the base of a tree, right hand covered in blood, blood spots dripping all over her body, her right arm placed along the side of her body, 4 tree branches arranged in a pattern on her naked body. The pattern, again, getting to the defense theory, someone else is responsible. This is ritualistic. These are Odinists who did this. Abby, positioned on her back, fully clothed. No blood on the clothes or body except the neck where the fatal wound was inflicted. Elbows bent with right and left after placed on the chest. Left leg straight, right leg bent at the knee. Bent right leg under the left leg. 3 branches forming an asterisk. Small sticks, crudely mimicking horns or antlers placed over her hair. Now that's based on the papers. The actual images were leaked online. And from that, you had all this fallout, which resulted in an in-camera proceeding, which means a proceeding in the judge's chambers, out of the public courtroom. But there was a transcript of that. I want to read part of what took place October 19th after the leaking of those photos. The court, you left materials, this is to the defense attorneys who are in there, you left materials all over the conference room table, accessible to anyone. And this friend of yours, who apparently you have consulted with on the case, it pains me to say this, but the totality of these circumstances demonstrate gross negligence and incompetence on the part of the defense team. I am unsatisfied with your representation of Mr. Allen. I am gravely concerned about his rights to have competent, non-negligent representative. Then Mr. Rossi, one of the attorneys, says, what you're giving us a chance to do is bow out gracefully, if you will, if that's the right term. Is there a scenario where the court would accept if we stayed on the case? So is that an option that the court would entertain? The court, no. Then, the first time I've ever had court TV cameras in a courtroom, the judge, Judge Dole, came out on the bench and said this.
We've had an unexpected turn of events, ladies and gentlemen. Earlier this afternoon, the defense attorneys have withdrawn their representation of Mr. Allen. Mr. Baldwin made an oral motion to withdraw. I granted that oral motion to withdraw, and Mr. Rosie will be submitting a written motion to withdraw, I'm assuming within the next couple of days.
And what the defense attorneys who now want back on the case is that it was a coerced withdrawal to a certain extent. And now Richard Allen has different defense. Will it be a different defense theory? There's a lot at stake here and a lot going on. We need to make some sense of it. So joining us tonight, the folks who've been on top of this from the beginning, from Indianapolis, Indiana, the hosts of the Murder Sheet podcast, Anya Kane and Kevin Greenlee are with us. And in Chicago, Illinois, criminal defense attorney, host of Defense Diaries, he's smart, Bob Motta is with us as well. Kevin Greenlee is an attorney, by the way, also. Just want to point that out so everyone knows. Don't hold it against them, folks. You know, we got a lot of lawyers here. Okay, Anya and Kevin, let's start here as I'm getting through all of that. And you've got these attorneys that want to come back on, but this leak has caused a lot of repercussions. And you all have investigated this leak. You've taken a look at it. It's resulted in an arrest. What can you tell us about how this leak came about and who exactly is allegedly responsible for it?
Certainly. So our role in this sort of effectively started October 5th. We received some crime scene images along with other leak discovery. Pretty quickly, our source wanted to sort of turn around and cooperate with law enforcement. We alerted law enforcement and the defense. We sort of discussed all this. And so what ended up happening was a man named Mitch Westerman came forward to Andy Baldwin and ended up telling him, I did this. Now, who's with Mitch Westerman? He is actually a close friend of Andy Baldwin. He used to work with him at the law firm there. And apparently Baldwin was using him as some sort of consultant on the case, not officially, but basically viewed him as a really talented strategist and was kind of running things by him on Delphi. He was passing that along to others. And this ultimately ended up with the leaking of crime scene photographs and other discovery and also trial strategy, things like that. And so it's been now what has happened is Mitch Westerman, you can see his mugshot here, has been arrested and charged with criminal conversion. So they can't charge him with theft because he didn't really take anything, but he's basically accused of improperly using these images, and it's a whole mess.
And I think it's important to stress that this leak should not be seen in isolation. There's a context here. Judge Gull indicated that she saw this basically as the straw that broke the camel's back. And she cites other things that these defense attorneys have done since the beginning of the case, which caused her to lose confidence in them. She says they've lied in court filings. She said they've kept from her information about an earlier leak. They weren't forthcoming about it. So it's really important not to see this leak in isolation as part of a bigger picture.
Follow up to that on the leak and and what has taken place here. At any point during your coverage of this story, have there been leaks from investigators or prosecutors or anyone on the other side of all this at any step of the investigation?
Yes, it's interesting. A lot of people have sort of conflated at times like our coverage with of Kegan Kline, which of course is a different criminal case with stuff that's going on here. And I think we can pretty confidently say nothing like this because
nobody on the prosecution side has ever leaked to us discovery materials that was protected by an order from a judge.
Yeah, that's what distinguishes this, I think, in the minds of, the people going through this basically in the center of it. So it's kind of interesting, but it does sort of stand apart. Although I will say Rosie, for his part, has alleged that, Barbara McDonald has sources, so that means that she's benefiting from a current leak. I think the facts on that are a bit iffy, though.
Bob Motta, let me ask you, and I've seen a letter written by Richard Allen where he says he wants the attorneys back. The attorneys want to get back in the case. They've gone to the Supreme Court of Indiana to try to get back in the case. The leaking of crime scene photos by someone associated with the defense, from your perspective, do you see anything that helps or hurts the defendant's rights in this case? Because I think that's really the basis of the judge getting rid of the attorneys, is that they're not competent and effective counsel. I think that's basically the legal standard for the most part. What are your thoughts, Bob?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, with friends like that, who needs enemies, right, Vinny?
No, yeah, that's
so
problematic.
Yeah, as far as the leak itself, you know, the reality, we can't pretend it's something that it wasn't, which was a leak that made it out to the public en masse. It just didn't. It didn't make it out to the world. They didn't see it. Yes, it's incredibly disturbing that anyone would come in and take photographs of graphic crime scene photos of two beautiful young girls for any reason, let alone to start distributing for reasons unknown. Frankly, that's one thing that still is a mystery, why this guy would have done that. It certainly doesn't benefit the defense. You know, I've heard people talk about, oh, well, gee, it was Baldwin wanting to support his Odinism theory by getting these out. Well, that's anybody who's practiced criminal law and tried cases knows that that's absurd. No criminal defense attorney would ever want crime scene photos out to the public, because what it does is it incites the public against their client. So the thought of, or the mention of Baldwin doing it intentionally was obscene to me. And I've heard it mentioned multiple times. And you know, as far as whether or not his rights to a fair trial have been potentially injured by this leak, I'm just not seeing it, because the photographs never made it out. And let's not forget, you know, the reality is that these aren't state secrets. These aren't things that, you know, you have to have some kind of security level in order to see them. They're crime scene photos for a case that's going to be a public trial. And you know, Vinny, you were a prosecutor. I mean, unfortunately, in trials, in order to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt, especially in a homicide case, you are going to have to prove that a homicide took place, which means that the pictures are going to have to be made public. When I say public, I'm going to be talking about they're going to have to be produced at trial, and the people within the courtroom are going to see them. Now, does that mean that you guys or us on Court TV are going to be able to view them? Probably not. Depends on what the judge says, if they're going to allow cameras in the courtroom, which at this point, I'm not optimistic. But, you know, the reality is that they become public. Trials are public. People are confusing what these pictures are as if they're some kind of secret government documents wherein they're not going to be made public at trial. So eventually they're coming out anyway. That's the facts, you know. And to get to like whatever Judge Gull's impetus, and Kevin brought up the fact that it was the camel's back that had been broken because there were multiple straws. Well, that's why you have an evidentiary hearing. Because whatever she found, we haven't heard the full story behind it. I've heard half stories. I haven't heard what the defense's side of it is, because she chose to move forward with this without having an evidentiary hearing. And the problem that I have with it is when I hear that the state finally got some help in terms of Jim Luttrell being brought on to help Nick McClelland try the case with them. You know, and this is late. This is in October. So he was going along kind of on his own with a rather massive case. And you have to think about this looming trial date of January 8th. And when I have defense counsel saying on the record and in pleadings that they were advised the judge that they were going to put a speedy demand in and that they were going to go to trial on January 8th. When you think about the amount of litigation that still had to take place, and it had to take place, Vinny, you know, when there is a speedy trial deadline, that is in stone. If they don't go to trial on January 8th, meaning the state and the judge be ready, meaning that she's got to make time in her busy docket for Allen County, which is not Carroll County, she's got to make time for all the pending motions, including the pending Frank's motion, which she had, by her own admission, had not gotten through any of the evidence, and hadn't finished the memo itself. I think when you kind of look at the threat of them going to trial as an impetus for why the judge may have wanted these two guys off, I think it has to be looked at. I really do, because that trial date in terms of 2 months, and you know, Vinny, from when you practiced, it's a blink of an eye when you're preparing for trial. 2 months is nothing.
Oh,
so
especially a case of this nature. Anya, Kevin, I just want to follow up on Mitch Westerman. Is he a lawyer, number one? And number two, was there ever any explanation as to why he did it?
Mitch Westerman is not an attorney. He did take the bar, but did not pass. So he was in the role at the law firm with Andy Baldwin as an operations manager. But he was still very much a member of the team. We actually interviewed him before all this happened back in March of 2023. And he talked a lot about how he would provide strategic insights and kind of bat around ideas. That was sort of the vibe at this firm. So why would Westerman do this? It's very unclear to us. When we interviewed him, he spoke with great affection about Andy Baldwin, his former boss, his mentor in many ways. And so it struck us as very, very odd that somebody who, cares about a person they worked with, would take action that ultimately would hurt that person. And so, yeah, motives are not clear. Ultimately, it would be hard to know that because Westerman himself in his affidavits where he talks about this is very vague. He admits to the actions he's doing, but he's not giving us the insight into why he's doing it.
Well, you mentioned it, and you guys are always on top of it on the Murder Sheet podcast. Let's take a listen to that interview you did with Mitch Westerman. Again, this is before all of this controversy, before the leak. Let's listen.
He just makes everybody feel real comfortable. I mean, I think he's just a real, like I said, when you talk to him or if you have, he's just casual. He's just kind of a dude, He's just kind of a dude, and the whole crew's kind of like that. Like I said, when it was time to be really serious and get down to work, like it got really serious and the days were long and hours were long and things got tense. But the rest of the time, it's pretty casual and fun and real comfortable.
There he is on the Murder Sheet contest. Anya Kane, Kevin Greenlee staying with us. Bob Mott is staying with us. When we come back, we are going to take a look at the Odinistic tentacles that are all over the allegations of the prior defense team. We'll do that, plus coming up next hour.
In the low country of South Carolina, big news connected to Alec Murdaugh as he gets ready to head back to court tomorrow to be sentenced in a controversial plea deal. We are live from the low country with the latest.
I agree that I wrongly took all of that money, Your Honor, and did all of those crimes. I disagree with some of the narrative, but not the essential elements of the facts of the crimes.
Alec Murdaugh, convicted double murderer, just accepted a plea deal from prosecutors.
How do you plead?
I plead guilty, Your Honor.
He stole the money from Tony Satterfield.
Over $1 million of his own client's settlements.
Why did you agree to that?
Because I trusted him.
This unbelievable fall from grace.
I was selfish, and I just took the money.
The Murdaugh Stolen Million Sentencing. Live coverage Tuesday morning, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Downhill. Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill.
That was the video we saw for years, and according to prosecutors, that's the killer. And according to prosecutors, that's Richard Allen, the Delphi murderer. Relatively simple case of a man who commits an opportunistic type of murder. Carrying a gun, gets the girls to go to a certain place, and then murders them. Defense, completely different theory, involving a ritualistic killing by a group of men somehow associated through the ancient Nordic religion of Odinism. That's the allegation. So the allegations by the defense in their papers are very thick and very specific. So I'm going to run through some of them here. to try to give you a flavor for what they are alleging, okay? So we begin with person A. We're not naming any of the people. We're just giving them letters. So person A lives here in Logansport, Indiana, which is 21 miles away from Delphi. Delphi, Indiana is where person B lives, okay? You got person A, person B. Person A, their son was dating one of the victims, Abby Williams. Person A would visit person B in Delphi to practice Asatru/Odinist rituals. Is somehow, again, these are all allegations by the defense, associated with the Vinlander gang, which apparently white supremacists, I believe. Ex-wife of says person A and person B stopped being friends after a fight during a ritual in the woods. Images on Facebook page resembled the crime scene. Again, according to the defense, multiple tips about person A were called in after these murders. Let's get back to person B now. Again, from Delphi, Indiana. Person B's home, only 3.1 miles from the closest entry point to the murder scene. Holds the Asatru Odinist religious ceremonies at his home. A 2016 video purportedly shows person B using his finger to mark or paint a tree, which is an allegation of what was found at the scene, some blood or something on a tree. Let's take a look now at three more people. Rushville, Indiana. Person C, D, and E all live there, but that's 271 miles from Delphi, okay? So not around the corner. Person C is a Vinlander and an Odinite, is friends with person A, person B, and person D. Recruits members for the Vinlander gang. Drove up to Delphi around Valentine's Day in 2017 to see his, quote, Vinlander buddies. When he drove back from Delphi, he had blood along the side of his car. That's person C. Person D, also Rushville, Indiana, linked to person A through Facebook and recreates the Facebook posts that are made by person A. Person A posts something, then all of a sudden person D does the same thing. Told his sisters he was involved in the murders and said he was part of a gang. Said to his sister that he made horns out of sticks and placed them on Abby's head. Asked the police if he could explain why his spit was on the girls, would he still be in trouble? The investigator, though, describes him as having the mental capacity of a 7 or 8-year-old. He lied to police when he told them he did not know person C. He told police he was home in Rushville on the day of the murders. Now let's move to person E. Told police he was with person D in Muncie, Indiana. You know, person D, who said he was in Rushville, was in Muncie, Indiana, visiting a friend in the hospital on the day of the murders. Told police person D was communicating inappropriately with underage girls on the internet. According to person C, person E was interested in joining the Vinlander gang. And don't forget about the one other big revelation about the context of Odinism in this case is that the prison guards who were watching Richard Allen are alleged to be Odinites. And then they admitted not necessarily being Odinites, but I think they said Nordic heathenry, something along those lines. So we've got to get to the bottom of all these Odinist Nordic tentacles in the case. Still with me, Anya Kane, Kevin Greenlee from the Murder Sheet Podcast, Bob Mott, a great attorney, joining us from Little Rock, Arkansas tonight. She's also been, of course, on the Murder Sheet Podcast. President and CEO of the Troth, the largest international organization for heathenry. That's Lauren Crow. Great to see you tonight. And in Salt Lake City, private investigator, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, and author of Deceived. Take a look at it, folks. Deceived, great book. It's that time of year, giving gifts. Why not give this to the true crime lover in your family? Mike King is back with us. All right. Lauren Crow, let me start with you. Heathenry was One of the guards said, listen, I'm not an Odinist. I practice heathenry. Is there a difference? Are these things connected? What, from your perspective, what is an Odinist? And who are these people that we're talking about that are doing what they're alleged to be doing by the defense?
I think the easiest way to explain it is Odinism is a prison gang. It is a gang that disguises itself as a religion. Odinism, specifically in prisons, started by a woman named Elsa Christensen in the early 1980s in Florida. And their sole purpose for gathering as a religion was so that they could have cover to then talk about white supremacist political activity and other activity with impunity. So Odinism is, think of it as Odinism, if you think about it, it's the Westboro Baptist Church of Germanic and Norse paganism, which all of the things we're talking about right now fall under kind of this umbrella of Germanic and Norse paganism. Germanic in the sense of Germanic languages. So you think of Anglo-Saxon, Frankish, Aramaic, all of these tribes that existed pre-Christianity in Northern Europe. So then you have Asatru. Asatru and Odinism are not the same thing. Asatru in the United States, I'm speaking specifically in the United States because it is different in Europe, is a racist but not white supremacist gang racist form of paganism. So they believe that to be a Norse pagan, that should be allowed to people with Norse descent, so white people essentially. You have to be white enough. And then you have heathenry. So heathenry is a blanket term. I practice what's called inclusive heathenry, and we believe anyone can be heathen. You know, as we say, we're not so arrogant to think we know who the gods are going to call, right? We're not going to try to tell our gods what to do. And so the problem that I'm seeing in here is, first of all, Odinite is not a thing. I don't know where they come up with this. It's a mineral. It's found in like sedimentary areas. I have a geology background, so the first time I read that, I was very confused as to why they were talking about rocks. But also, I think one important thing is to remember is that Odinism is present anywhere that there's racism because it's not a religion. It's a gang that is in prisons using the guise of religion to be able to gather and do gang activity.
Gotcha. I mean, and they sort of say that, but not exactly the way you're saying. So, Mike King, from your background, knowing what we know, limited obviously, but about the crime scene, about what happened here, the allegations of the defense, does this strike you as a ritualistic type of murder? What happened to Abby and Libby, and do you see it being in sync with these allegations of these rocks/Odinites who were practicing, I guess, outside of prison and meeting and doing things allegedly together?
Well, I really like that quick lesson that we just had, and I appreciate that because it helped me kind of put into perspective a couple of my thoughts, Vinny. And first and foremost, we have to recognize that groups like white supremacist groups for decades have used symbology to somehow get across messaging. We also know that criminals can go in and create a crime scene. They go from a very organized state to this very disorganized state where we see all kinds of bizarre things happening, but then go through a process of staging where they spend some time maybe sharing things that they saw. We saw it with Richard Ramirez. Remember that pentagram that he kept writing on the wall? He told me personally he was never a Satanist at first, but it became good business. So we got to keep in mind, is this an artifact of what was really going on? If this was truly a group of people who were going through ritual crime, I think we'd see evidence in other locations to support it, not just relationships or a video that came out that somebody, including Richard Allen, could have seen and recreated on the fly in the middle of a crime scene. We have to look at this thing in totality and not get sucked into these individual pieces of really amazing pieces of evidence and information, because we can go down rabbit holes that completely cause us to forget all the facts and just twist everything we're seeing to fit whatever goofy theory we're coming up with. And I guess this is what really is putting pressure on the prosecution to make sure they can come in.
Absolutely. Reasonable
and say,
doubt
listen,
comes in many different forms. You throw stuff in there.
You're not a kid.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Lauren, and if you can answer quickly, that'd be appreciated. We're almost out of time. How prevalent is heathenry / this Norse paganism? Because, I mean, all these names are popping up, including, I think it was 2 or 3 of the prison guards that were there. So should I be shocked that there's that many in a particular area?
No. I am president of the largest organization. We have 2,500 members around the world. The church in Iceland, for instance, has over 1,000 members. I think more than that now. It's actually, paganism as a whole is one of the fastest growing religions in the world. And it especially draws people who are very into military, first responders. Those people tend to be very drawn into it because of the warrior aspects, the "in Odin we trust" thing, very common among, those patches are very common among military, first responders, police, like, who are heathen. It is a way for them to say, you know, I'm putting my life in, to put it in Christian terms, I'm trusting God and putting my life in his hand as I go out and do my job today, is what those patches mean. It's the same as saying, you know, Jesus bless me today.
Anya and Kevin, I want to give you the final word. We only have like 15 seconds on Odinism, the overall. Put a button on this for us.
It'll be very interesting to see what the next set of public defenders does with this, if they continue the Odinist angle or if they drop it.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating. Anya Kane, Kevin Greenlee, thank you so much. Murder Sheet Podcast. Bob Ma's going to stay around. Lauren Crow, appreciate your time. Mike King, always great to see you. When we come back, we'll revisit that crime scene one more time.
Alec Murdaugh, convicted double murderer, just accepted a plea deal from prosecutors.
How do you plead?
I plead guilty, Your Honor.
He stole the money from Tony Satterfield.
Over $1 million of his own client's settlements.
Why did you agree to that?
Because I trusted him.
This unbelievable fall from grace.
I was selfish, and I just took the money.
The Murdaugh Stolen Million sentencing. Live coverage Tuesday morning, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
The murder of these 2 young girls was horrific. The crime scene was horrific. I've read the descriptions. We know some pictures have been leaked online, but none of this stuff has been made completely publicly disseminated, right? So a lot of people don't know exactly, but some people, I think, have a better idea. Still with me tonight, Bob Mata, great defense attorney and host of his podcast, Defense Diaries, and joining us in Orange County, California, the author of Forest for the Trees, a book about the Delphi murders, investigative producer Chris Todd. All right, Chris, start with you. I haven't been there. I didn't go to the scene. I haven't seen the pictures of the scene. They've been leaked online. I have not seen them. What can you tell us about the scene, and what does this scene tell you about what happened to these 2 young girls?
Well, obviously right now there's a lot of legal issues with talking about the crime scene, photos and the crime scene itself. So I have to be very careful right now.
Absolutely. I want you to be 1,000% careful.
You know, we've had collateral damage. Someone lost their life over this, and that person's work will not be in vain. I will say that. And from what I've been on this case for years, and just in general, what I'm going to say is I do not believe Abby and Libby were killed where they were found. I believe they were killed in an enclosed area on Ron Logan's property, and I believe they were placed there late at night or early in the morning. And I've talked about I was one of the first people to expose the manner of death, and they tried to silence me many times on this, so I have to be a little reserved today, but I'm very appreciative to be here with you.
Bob Mata, let me ask you, to me, this case really comes down to the scene, right? Because what we've heard from the original defense team, a lot of it's based on the scene and the other things that were uncovered during the course of the investigation. But this was a case with many different potential suspects involved. Richard Allen was never one of them. Never one of them. I mean, should have been based upon, him admitting that he was there years ago, and should have been more thoroughly investigated years ago. But prosecution has their theory now on that he's the one that's responsible. From your perspective, the scene, how significant is it? What story do you believe it tells and will tell inside a courtroom?
I think it tells a huge story, Vinny. I think that, and again, and you stated in the opening, look, this information wasn't cooked up by the defense. It came straight from the discovery tendered to them by the state. And, 3 cops who weren't a part of the unified command thought enough of the crime scene that they continued to investigate for months. When I'm talking about, Ferenczi and Todd Click and Murphy. Like, these guys went out and continued to interview, continued to investigate. So, and as far as I know, the unified command was only made up of 6 cops. We're not talking about 50, 60 cops, excuse me, that were out there, scouring the earth. We're talking about 6 guys who apparently didn't agree with continuing this investigation any further into, somebody who we're not going to name here, but stated that he was at the crime scene, that identified that he had put horns above one of the girls' heads, which only somebody who was there would know. And, for whatever reason, law enforcement has abandoned it. In terms of trying to get to the truth here, which is, I think, what everybody's really main goal should be, and I know that it's the family's main goal. I think the families of the girls want whoever did this to pay for it, whether it be Richard Allen or whether it be somebody else, that it's the person that actually, or persons that actually did this are the ones who are going to pay. And I think that it requires more investigation. That's what I think, Vinny. I think that they stopped investigating that angle after three weeks. And I think that the thing speaks for itself.
Yeah. So Chris, how, and I know you've got your theory, you've laid it out. How many people potentially do you believe are involved here, and could Richard Allen be one of them?
And I do believe I know how police got onto Richard Allen. And when I reveal that, it's going to be a bombshell, as usual, that I like to bring sometimes. But I'm not going to comment on it this second. But I do believe I know how they did, and it's going to tell a lot about the investigation, and it's going to say a lot about Richard Allen. I do believe there are multiple killers, and I believe one of those killers is not with us today.
Wow. This trial is going to be, I think, difficult for prosecutors. I've seen a lot of cases going in, reasonable doubt. You wait to see what it could potentially be, but there's so many different people touching all of this, and we'll see how it all turns out. But always appreciate your insight, Bob Motta. Chris Todd, I thank you for walking that tightrope for us tonight. It's much appreciated. Have a great night. Thank you.